like every single review almost, I'm going to be connecting my Xbox 360 controller. You can find those on AliExpress very cheap, the aftermarket ones, and they work great. So the device has been plugged in, booted up into Batocera, and yeah, you can do a different configuration. That we can have like this plug and play where we can switch between windows. So if you're going to be removing and reboot it, you get into Windows, plugging it back in, and if you set it to USB boot first, you will have the Batocera drive set up. But let's do a chit chat about it and what can we actually play. Okay, so next up, let's take a close look at system settings again. Then we're going to be information. And let's zoom in and let's talk about the specifications. Version, that's what we're going to be checking out. So first of all, 29 Celsius is quite good for this HP, because I've been looking into different mini PCs, most of them getting up 45 Celsius. So cooling wise, this thing is absolutely great. We're using over here the i5, the 6th generation 6600T CPU. And the reason why I went for this particular model, because yeah, it was just really cheap to buy. And if you're getting like in the 8th generation, somehow they're like asking 150, even over $200 freaking dollars here. It's like nuts. However, we have a CPU count of 4, or at least like CPU number or the cores itself. So the overall specs are not bad, but let's see how far we can push it with some emulation itself. So when it comes to playing some Killer Instinct, this runs perfectly without no problem whatsoever. I can still remember that I actually played this on the Xbox Classic for the first time in emulation, but now having the option with just a cheap mini PC to actually run this. However, you can even run this with, let's say, lower end mini PCs like a dual core or a very old, let's say, 2nd generation i5. So Mortal Kombat 1 was, for example, one of my favorite games to actually test on those, let's say, Pandora's boxes, simply because this was like the ultimate game we can actually test. But it runs, without, of course, without any problem, like thousands of other games on a mini PC with Batocera. So if you just want to get into some MAME gaming, this is just a very cool way to actually do that. Every single Gamebox review I mentioned that we couldn't play Tekken, the MAME version. Most of the time only the PlayStation version, where that game is just great as it is. However, the MAME is just a real arcade version and this runs perfectly. So, but let's move into some other Tekken games like Tekken Tag, because that was a system that could not even play it on many Super Console XPC. And back in the day when I actually started making these videos about them, like the emulation in general. But at this point we don't have any issue whatsoever when it comes for playing the MAME Tekken games. Even the Tekken Tag runs full speed, no problem whatsoever. And I also tried it on, let's say, some basic systems like an old i5, and they even had the option to actually run this. So this is not a problem for this CPU i5 6th generation. Yeah, so when it comes to the Panasonic 3DO, this is another system that is difficult to emulate on those Android game boxes with Emulation most of the time. And another thing I noticed that this is one of those mini PCs that does no problem whatsoever. Did notice some differences between the loading time, because some PC is a little bit faster than the other one. But beside that, when it comes to emulation performance, we can actually run this game like Return to Fire. Let's see if it dips down. I must point out that I'm not running the latest emulator when it comes to this. But besides that, it seems to be working just fine as it is. So this is one of those many games I also wanted to try out besides playing on my original 3DO. It's just fun to emulate and to have this on the collection. And this seems to be running just fine now. But moving into some more emulators like the Atomiswave do have great emulation performance. Here it doesn't even matter which game I'm going to be playing. And I find this Demolished Fish such a weird game. But beside that, it is going to be a great overall experience with Atomiswave, Dolphin Blue and other games. And with arcade, there's so far not I think a lot of restrictions when it comes to that. Sorry. But let's switch between drives and let's hook up a new drive of Batocera to get the best emulators and best performance. Because sometimes getting a newer emulator and also a Batocera version, we can have, let's say, the overall better performance on also old school chips, where this is still a 6000 model. But let's mess with some rendering resolution, because the Dreamcast that will run just fine. Holding the A button with this version, we can get into the advanced game option. This way you can also use select if I'm saying it correctly. And yeah, in here we can finding the rendering resolution, and the rendering resolution has been set to 4K, but it is not going to be a great overall experience. So let's go to 1920 by 4040 when it comes to that, and I would not be surprised that we do have an overall great emulation performance there. So I did notice with starting up the game, I did see some stuttering here and there. So when it comes to the overall performance, I think the full HD is the maximum we can push this thing because of the 6th generation i5. But the question remains, of course, if you want to get into some Dreamcast emulation, do you think it's really worth it, the upscaling itself? And that is one of the things you need to ask, because there are many different cheap devices now that can actually play Dreamcast without any problem whatsoever. So you can just pay a fraction of the cost. But again, if you just want to have like some overall good emulation with a little bit of upscaling, a mini PC like this is just the way to go to. So moving on into some Sega Saturn. Having been set to 1080p with Die Hard, the arcade, it was also a very difficult game to emulate, and I had a lot of struggles with those cheaper game boxes, but just actually cool that we can just play this and even have the option with a little bit of upscaling using the Yaba Shinshiro emulator. And also you can also tweak a little bit with it, what kind of emulator works best for you. But so far I can see this is just great. I will not even push it a little bit further. Yeah, we can try 2K, 4K and whatsoever, but it's highly possible it's going to be stuttering like crazy, because then we're going to be pushing it over its limits and having not the experience we actually want. And 1080p looks kind of good when it comes to that. 1080p with N64. So we do have a little bit more power than the cheap ones I've been checking out. So I mean, particularly when it comes to this old school, I think I even tested out an i5 with a 2nd generation and a dual core. And they had the option to actually play some N64, but most of them just on native and sometimes 480 depending on the game. But now we can even play this on 1080p upscale, but you can see it just froze. Okay, that's kind of cool to see. Can we reset it? No. Oh, there we go, there we go, there we go. Okay, wait, what? I don't know what's going on. We could also... Okay, it's not going well. So let's reset it and let's try that again with a different setting, because that was not the way how we wanted to play. So what we can actually do is going all the way up to all the settings. Let's put it to 960 by 720 and let's try that again. And that is what I mean when it comes to tweaking, you know. This is just it's absolutely crazy if you think about it. We can play so many different games on one freaking PC. However, you always need to do a little bit of tweaking. So what is the best option for your setup? Besides having the different Intel chipsets with different generations. Okay, so let's get into it. If it still freezes, it means it's not something to do with the rendering resolution. Yeah, so that runs a little bit better. Okay, a little bit better. It doesn't even freeze now. Can be an accident, but I think it not. It got a message from shaders, something went completely wrong. But this is one of the many things that you need to take note. Yeah, just get a little bit of knowledge about Batocera and just sometimes messing with it if you have some problems with your favorite game. But we still needed to try another N64 game. So if let's say the correct resolution was 920 by 4040, but you can see that it actually freezes. So this is not going to be an overall good experience upscaling it to so far. You can see it freezes, but just do a little bit of a gameplay. No, this is just not the way how you want to go. It does look absolutely amazing on higher resolution when it comes to that, but no. We push it to the maximum level. But let's get into some GameCube with 1080p upscaled resolution, and whoa, this looks absolutely great. It's just awesome to see that we can do a little bit of upscaling of GameCube at this point. And with some tweaking, different games, we have different results. So let's say if you have an F-Zero X, it's possible you can only render that on 480 or 720p. Just want to give like a random game I love to play, Soul Calibur, I love this franchise. And yep, this looks great. And maybe you can do a little bit of more tweaking, getting even better result with rendering resolutions. But so far, I think this is just great, and this is just a great balance, but having a stable 60 frames per second. So with the PlayStation part, PlayStation 1 4K rendering resolution. So that is the highest I have been on, let's say, these cheaper game box emulation Batocera mini PCs. And you can just actually see that the i5 6th generation seems to be handling it just fine. So with a lot of, let's say, dual cores on old i5s, we had like 1080p resolution. And so for PlayStation 1, there are a lot of game boxes out there that can just be on native resolution and plays perfectly with no problem whatsoever. We're combining this with the DuckStation, so the result can be slightly different if you're going to be using a different emulator, but performance is just amazing. 4K render resolution, so if you want to experience the old school PlayStation games in a different settings, yeah, this is going to be absolutely great. Moving up to the PlayStation 2, we're having rendering resolution of 1080p. So not only we can even play PlayStation 2, we even have the option to upscale it to 1080p and having some overall good performance. Of course, if you want to, you can also get into the 2K or some other crazy resolutions, but I just want to choose the safe route to see if we can have like PlayStation 2 on some overall perfect emulation. It depends also what kind of games you're playing. God of War is slightly more difficult to emulate, so we're going to be needing maybe a little bit tweaking there. But most games, what you can just actually see, this runs on great on the 4K resolution. By the way, I'm getting my ass kicked over here. The first problem we're having when having an older CPU and not a lot of cores to have to work with emulation. And with PlayStation 3 we will see that it's going to be like a very long time when the game is actually loaded in. I've been testing it on AMD Ryzen's i9s and those are like super fast and loading times are sometimes even instant. So where we do have overall maybe good emulation, the loading times can be absolutely a horrible thing. So let's grab ourselves something to drink in the meantime. But actually getting into the game, you can see we do have overall great performance. So also the more demanding games, that is going to be a tweaking situation. We don't need to do any craziness when it comes to filtering whatsoever, because this is just pushing this device to the limit. But it's actually cool to see that we can play some PlayStation 3 games on an older i5. But so far so good, and I'm only testing out one single game, but we can also maybe do a deep dive into the future with multiple games to see what the performance are. But for such an, let's say, old mini PC, this is just crazy. So PlayStation Portable, it's not disappointing. We have 4K rendering resolution. The games still look really, yeah, how would I say that? Low pixelated, not really detailed. But it's kind of cool to see that we can play 4K resolution. I've been trying 10 times, that is even possible, but that is too much. So also here we do have a limitation due of the older CPU-GPU combination. So when it comes to playing old school retro games on Batocera with this mini PC, it's already quite old CPU. The i5 is just amazing, even having a lot of rendering resolution options. If you just want to get in some old school stuff, 8-bit, 60-bit, also here we have great emulation when it comes to, let's say, 3DO, Panasonic, and you name it. So when it comes to, let's say, emulation on a PC like this, I'm quite satisfied with the end result. Take note, if you're going to be having, let's say, a newer generation i5 or maybe getting an i7 for the same amount of money, you will have yourself a crazy deal and even have the option to basically do a little bit of more tweaking and even having better resolution. For example, with PlayStation Portable that we have 10 times, or getting some 4K or better resolution with some platforms like PlayStation 2 and etc. And of course, more cores means we're having faster time with, or faster loading times with the PlayStation 3 emulator. More options, but again, some restrictions. That is something we need to live with a mini PC like this.